As a continuation of the lecture series, today we are going to see testing of hypothesis. Before going to the testing of hypothesis, we have to know some basic definitions. Some of the basic definitions are population, sample, sample size, parameter and statistics, and we have to know few notations. According to statistics, what is population means? Population is a collection of individuals of a representative sample of a large group of people with one or more characteristics in common, and this population may be finite or infinite. Next is sample. So sample is a small portion of a population which is selected randomly from the population, and this process of drawing a sample from a population is called sampling size. So the number of elements or individuals in the sample is said to be sample size. The next is parameter. So if we do any statistical method and compute any compute any data from the population, then it is known as parameter. When we use statistical method and compute any data from the sample, then we call it to be a statistic. Next is we are going to see some measures and for the population as well as the sample. Here there are few notations which you have to use to differentiate between the population and sample. To denote the size of the population, we use capital N, and to denote the sample size of the sample, we use small n. To mean, we use mu, and for a sample we use x bar. For standard deviation we use sigma, and we use s for sample. For proportion we use capital P, and we use p dash to denote the sample of proportion. For variance we use sigma square for population, and for sample we use s square. Here mean is the mean is the average of the population's data, and standard deviation is the statistical error or the deviation of the values from the mean value, how it is deviating from the common value. We call it to be standard deviation. The next is sampling distribution. This sampling distribution is obtained by making few arrangements according to frequency in the samples. So we call it to be a sampling distribution. Next is standard error. Standard deviation of sampling distribution of a statistic is known as standard error, and it will be denoted by SE. And the average amount of variability, that is how the observations value is deviating from the common value, average value, we call it to be the standard deviation. The next is statistical hypothesis. In attempting to reach decision about population on the basis of sample observations, we make assumptions about population which are not necessarily true or called statistical hypothesis. So before making an assumption, we used to take true null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. These both are truly assumptions, so it may be true or may not be true. So the first one is null hypothesis. Null hypothesis is the hypothesis which is tested for possible rejection under the assumption. It is the true, and it will be denoted by H naught. So for any given data, first we have to assume the null hypothesis, and we assume that null hypothesis is the true value, and we will calculate the test statistic for the particular data using formulas based on whether it is a large sample or small sample. The next one is an alternate hypothesis. This alternate hypothesis is opposite to that of the null hypothesis, and it will be denoted by H1. The procedure of deciding whether to accept or reject the null hypothesis is called test of hypothesis. The next is level of significance. So the level of significance is where the The level of significance is the probability level below which the null hypothesis will be rejected. Basically, this level of significance will be taken at 5% or 1% level of significance. Next is critical region or region of rejection. So this region of rejection is the region where the null hypothesis will be rejected. Then the region which leads to the acceptance of null hypothesis is called acceptance region. The next is error in sampling. So basically, when we take any data, it's a human tendency to make error. So if we assume that H naught is true when it is false, which leads to the type 1 error. The type 2 error is accepting H naught when it is false. So when H naught is false, and if we accept that as accept it or assume it as a positive value, assume it as a true, then which leads to an error called type 2 error. So and we'll denote this type 1 error by alpha, and we denote this type 2 error by beta. And one more thing is, in the tail, the parameters according to the population parameters, some test may be of one tail or some may be of two tail. Two tail means we consider both the sides. If it is one tail, whether it will be of positive side or negative side. If mu naught is the population and population parameter and mu is the sample statistics, then the null hypothesis is given by mu naught is equal to mu minus mu naught. So for H1 such a mu is equal to mu naught, then it is two tailed. If mu is greater than mu naught, we will call it to be a one tail test, right tail test. When mu is less than mu naught, we call the test to be a left tail test. Thank you.